Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1176 of the daily content grind. You'd think I wouldn't stumble on that intro by now, but here we are. So, a few weeks ago, I polled you guys to figure out an age-old debate. Do you keep your toys sealed or do you open them up and play with them? And I was pleasantly surprised that most of you, the vast majority of you, do open your toys to enjoy them. I shouldn't be surprised because I've kind of fostered that in my community. The whole spirit of this channel is open your toys, play with them, enjoy them. That's what they were meant for. And that keeping them in box as kind of an investment opportunity is an incredible risk. It shouldn't surprise me that you mint in box collectors amounted to less than 2% of the vote. Again, doesn't mean your way of collecting is wrong, but my community, because of the years I have spent preaching this, really doesn't flow that way. I'm actually happy to see there's so many that kind of mix, because it really is, a matter of opportunity. It's like, it depends, right? And honestly, yeah, like I have mint in box stuff, which, I need to show off at some point. I still have never shown that off really, but that was way more one-sided than I was hoping it was going to be. So this time I have elected to come up with a debate topic that is going to be more divisive. I want to turn you all against each other. And we're going to have a little bit of debate that I don't see anyone talking about, but you know what? It's something that really kind of, I think, is going to separate generations of Transformer fans here. Do you prefer the blaster rifle or the arm cannon? So Transformers pretty much had the blaster rifle as like a standard accessory because it's an 80s action figure line. Of course, every Transformer came with a gun they could put in their hand. But we didn't really get arm cannons until we got into the 2007 Transformers movie, where it now became a thing where Transformers just kind of transformed a piece of themselves in order to have a weapon. And you know what? This is, it's like both are cool in their own ways. Both have flaws in their own ways. So I kind of want to see what your thought is. Now, I very much expect this to be, what generation did you grow up in? Because, if you are old school, if you have been following Transformers from its inception or from Beast Wars onward, even into the Unicron trilogy, you're going to be so much more familiar with the handheld weapons. But if you got in through the 2007 movie and the Michael Bay films, and you've carried on since, you're going to be very used to arm cannon Transformers, because that has been very much a normal thing for you. So this might be a generational separation here, but there are pluses and minuses for everything. So let's just quickly go through everything as quickly as I can, because I like to talk. So for the arm cannon, let's start with that. For number one, I feel like they are better for combat scenes, which is good for movies and it's good for video games. Because when it's an attached piece of you, you can't exactly drop it in the middle of a fight. That means that during a combat scene, you can keep weapon fire as part of the choreography, as part of the dynamic of the battle, without having to worry about like the logic of a character managing to hang on to it as they get tumbled and tossed around. At any point, you just transform that gun and start firing away even at close range. So you keep that in the combat scenes really, really effectively. It also frees up things to be a little bit more kinetic and have a lot more motion to them by, again, taking that element of, well, he should be like throwing his gun all over the place out of the equation. So in a combat scene and a battle scene, fights, yeah, like you've got definite boosts to an arm cannon, Also, it just kind of makes sense, right? It's a Transformer. They shape change. Like, why wouldn't you have part of your body? Why wouldn't you have your arm transform into your weapon? It just makes sense thematically for the franchise, for the weapons to transform just as much as the characters do. Especially when you get into the live action movies where the transformation schemes aren't nearly as set in stone or simplified as the originals. You can break an arm down into hundreds of pieces to reconfigure it into a cannon. You know, that just makes sense in those universes. You know, in a lot of modern Transformers, you just have like shifting forearms and, you know, barrels that flip out. And that just feels right for the franchise, right? You know, it adds an extra element of transformation into the fiction of Transformers, especially one that they can use in robot mode without having to like flip to a vehicle just to show off, hey, we can transform into stuff, we can change shape. So in that, yeah, I can see where that also makes sense for the series. Also, it doesn't have to be an arm cannon. Like, that is absolutely the most common. That's the thing we see the most in Transformers, but let's be real here. Arm cannons are just simple. Like, they are just the thing that you can, you know, the thing that just about any Transformer can be designed to do. But that doesn't mean we're limited to that. Look at Lockdown from Age of Extinction. I would argue he's one of the better movie villains because he does have a presence to him. But one of the reasons he stands out in the fandom so much is the face gun, where his weaponry comes out of his chest, transforms into his face, because it's their idea of like a robotic futuristic sniper rifle. You know what? That's kind of a cool concept. I can't really replicate that concept with a separate arm blaster, like, or an attachment style weapon. That's actually a pretty neat trick, and we don't really have to limit it to even that, you know? Like, we can have Transformers whose entire chest become some kind of weapon. You can have it come out of their leg for all I care, right? There's so many, that basically just gives you all the options in the world, you know? As long as the Transformer has a space on their body, you might be able to turn it into a weapon. And thematically, it might make sense. Thematically, it might not. It might just look weird. But you know what? Options. That said, here are some downsides to the whole arm cannon thing. The one thing that strikes me is that arm cannons tend to be kind of limited in ammunition. Anytime we really see an arm cannon in Transformers, it's doing one of two things. It is either firing your basic laser bolt, or it is firing some kind of munition. I have other thoughts about alien robots using, bullet casings and gunpowder, but I'm not going to get into that too much for a minute. But just because of the actual nature of the arm cannon weapons, that really does seem like the absolute limit of what they can do. It's not like, like one of the things I like, in another completely different geek debate, I prefer the mechanical web shooters of Spider-Man, because not only does it show a little bit more of his intelligence and creativity, it also gives you the ability to change up the webbing. Like if he is battling Electro, he knows to mix up some rubber into his webbing to eliminate his electric powers. That kind of thing. Or, mixing like a coagulant into it for Hydro Man. Things like that, Like things like that actually like make it more interesting. You can't really like load a special ammo type into an arm cannon. At least that we've never seen in Transformers before. It's mostly just kind of limited to just bullets or energy blasts. And don't get me wrong, those things can be cool, but it does limit their versatility. Also, as long as we're talking about ammo, where does it come from? Where does the ammo actually come from when you deal with these weapons? Now, the munitions are one thing. Like, okay, I don't see where on Optimus Prime he's just has all of these like big bazooka shells hidden across his body. Like, where in the transformation scheme does he store all of these like massive bullets that we have seen him firing from his arm cannon? And we've got like close-up scenes, like I think it's like Revenge of the Fallen, where you get like a really good close-up of like one of his shots from his arm cannon, and it's absolutely a big bullet. And we've seen it with a lot of Transformers. Like, it looks like muzzle fire. You can see the gunpowder explosion out of the end of the barrel a lot of times. It always feels weird to me. Like, if you were a Decepticon, wouldn't you study up Optimus Prime's schematic to find out where his weapons cache is and just aim for that? Like some random Decepticon just kind of shoots where like his left rib would be, and Optimus just explodes into a million pieces because he hit the gunpowder. Weird things like that come to my mind. And if it's an energy weapon, doesn't that mean you're firing your own energon at your enemies? Dinobot died, because he was doing that to destroy the golden disc. That was the last of his energy leaving him. And it occurs to me, like, have you ever seen Dead Man Wonderland? Ever seen that anime? It's the whole thing in that anime is the characters can use their blood as weapons, which means, once they use too much of it, they wear out. And wouldn't that happen to a Transformer who's like physically linked to their weaponry of some kind? Things like that start occurring to me. Like, why are you like, especially if your narrative is like the planet is low on energon. Okay, why are you shooting your own energon out of your body to fight? That seems a little reckless to me. On the toy side of it, I'm not a fan because a lot of times the arm cannon thing does require you to swap parts. And anything like that gets me a little bit nervous about wear and tear. So, like, especially when it's an arm cannon, like, pop the arm on and off over and over in order to actually, like, mount the weapon on the toy. I don't always feel like that. Or, like, in the case of, like, the Studio Series Gamer Edition toys, I need to have the normal arm on there in order to transform the figure. So if I want him with a weapon, especially the older ones that didn't have like a normal handle, I would have to pop a piece on, pop one on. And that makes me worry about long-term survivability of that joint and that peg. I don't want to come back to that toy and just find that the socket is now so loose that the arm just kind of falls off whenever it wants, because then I'm out of toy if the arm gets lost. Things like that cross my mind. Like if the handle of an accessory gun gets loose, big deal. Little nail polish or future floor polish will thicken it up, or just whatever. At least I'm not out the toy itself. But speaking of, let's talk about handheld weaponry, the blaster rifles. So in this case, the first thing I think of is I feel like it's better narratively for story purposes, whereas arm cannons work better in combat. The blaster rifles you can do so much more with narratively. So in this scene, Wheeljack is rescuing his friends who just got washed up in a river and are now like drained of their energy by energon chains. So he's using Sideswipe's flare gun to dry everybody off, and he's using Bluestreak's electric gun to recharge everybody really quickly. You can't pick up your friend's arm cannon in order to use it for a creative purpose. You also can't like pick up a salvaged weapon in the middle of a fight. Hey, Megatron, how'd you kill Optimus again? And then like it creates moments of tension, like in that same exact fight. The beginning of it, Megatron tackles Optimus, Optimus drops his rifle. So now you have a bigger moment of tension when Megatron is firing his arm cannon and Optimus does not have his rifle to respond. So now he's forced to go in close to Megatron, who's wielding to this date, what we know, to that point, the strongest weapon a Transformer actually possesses. That shows the character, and that lets you create tension. You don't get that as much out of an arm cannon because you can't really lose an arm cannon without losing your entire arm. And frankly, you got bigger things to worry about then. Especially when most Transformers seem like they can do it with both arms. So like they're never really without weaponry unless they're completely disarmed, in which case I think the battle's over at that point. I like external weapons because they can create a signature for the character. Optimus Prime has had so many toys, but almost all of them include some version of his ion cannon. And it's a signature of him. Like every toy of Optimus has to have some kind of rifle that has that block on the back that looks like some big exhaust. Like Optimus Prime's weapon is so powerful, it needs its own cooling unit in between shots, right? All of them kind of have that. They all have their own spin on the design, but they generally keep that same shape. It's iconic of the character. It's Optimus Prime. His rifle just has to have that look to it. And he's not the only one. If you've got a favorite Transformer that you've been following, from Generation 1 or wherever that character first came up, you know what their weapon looks like. I know Blitzwing's rifle has a big, long, either like an ammo clip, or more likely just a handguard on the bottom and then a fin on top, and it's bright purple. I get that. Cup. I'm always going to be able to spot Cup's weapon, because I grew up with that toy and it's a unique rifle that's in his color. So it lets you create this little like signature item up for every Transformer. And I kind of like that aspect of it. It gives them a little bit more personality. Also, toy-wise, they're just way more versatile. A lot of those arm cannon weapons really only fit onto the toy they were designed for. You can't mix and match. You can't swap. Your Autobot friend cannot take his buddy's weapon and overload himself with guns. Your Decepticons cannot like salvage arm cannons off of your fallen Autobots in order to use themselves. But you can do that with spare rifles and missile launchers and all that. So it gives you a little bit more to play with. It gives the toys a little bit more versatility to them. On the downside of the handheld weapons, they can feel a lot less sci-fi. This is a franchise about futuristic alien robots, right? So it does feel a little bit weird when Megatron's walking around the African savannah with a shotgun. On one hand, kind of cool. On the other hand, where is the logic? How does this make sense in any way? Odd. It just strikes me wrong. It just feels incorrect for the character and for the overall design. It's an alien robot. He should be using futuristic weaponry, and armed cannons do kind of, give off this futuristic, appearance. I'm the Mega Man guy. I know armed cannons come from the year 20XX. And that year ain't here yet. So that does take me out a little bit, when like sometimes the weapons feel kind of standard and they don't really stand out a whole lot. Sometimes they can create a signature, but sometimes they get lost in the jumble and they just don't really seem special. And I could say the same of a lot, when a lot of times these weapons are a little bit easy to keep track of because they're cast in one of the signature colors of the character, etc., etc. But there's so many just black rifles. Like there's, if you have a part bin for your Transformers anywhere, how many black rifles are just piled up and you have to go through some system in order to actually like identify what you have. You have to go through Transformer Land or tfu.info and try to figure out which black rifle is this? Who does this belong to? I've been searching for 2 hours. I still can't find. Oh wait, there it is. I sold that toy 2 years ago. Don't need that anymore. So that you can start feeling really generic. It starts, while some weapons can be signature, but sometimes they're just one in the pile, so it works both ways. With an arm cannon, at the very least, I know, like, I can spot which toy it goes to. Because in order to actually make it look like it's part of the character, not only does it have to be cast in their color of plastic, but it has to be painted to make it look like it's part of the arm. Meaning you've got 2 or 3 colors to work with to identify where it goes. That makes things a lot easier. So toy-wise, works a little bit better. Also, I'm not going to lie. There's just something about an arm cannon that just seems to be much more personal and have more impact to it. Unless you're wielding, Megatron's, fusion cannon, unless you've got that, it really doesn't feel like a lot of these weapons have a lot of impact to them. And that's story depiction doing that essentially, but it just feels like thematically the arm cannon just does have more impact to it. It is certainly more personal, like when you can punch somebody in the gut, transform, and then shoot straight through them. We've seen that happen in Transformers more than once. It's cool every time it happens, and sometimes it happens to the good guys, and then it's very brutal. But you don't get that with a rifle. You don't get that with an individual rifle. So like you lose a little bit of the more cool moments that some of the weaponry can provide. And it just doesn't feel like it has as much like impact to it at the end of the day. But that said, the argument does have two sides, and I'm not going to tell you which I prefer here. I'm just presenting the two options. I'm giving you my positives, I'm giving you my negatives, and now I'm giving you a task. In the description below, there is a link to a poll. Please go and fill it out. Let me know which one you prefer, which one you think is better. You can discuss it in the comments below as long as you keep it civil. But when we do this kind of debate video again, we are going to look at the results, and then I'll let everybody know who came out on top. But that is for later. For now, thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little back and forth in my brain. And as always, I will see you next time.
Analysis complete. Adapting translators to local language.
Are you out there?